Good afternoon. Welcome to this month's My Wellness Update presentation. Today's presentation is Lower Your Risk of Diabetes, presented by Dr. Erica Kretchman, endocrinologist in the Reid Endocrinology Center, which is located in the Medical Office Building, Suite 300. So please welcome Dr. Kretchman.
Hello, nice to see everybody here today on a Monday afternoon, which is just as hard as the morning sometime. I am excited to be here and talking. If you guys are aware or not, November is American Diabetes Month. So it's to raise awareness about diabetes, and that's why we kind of picked this particular topic to talk about lowering your risk of diabetes, because one of their big incentives or goal is to stop diabetes in its tracks. And we are just a few days short of World Diabetes Day, which was on November 14th. Did any of you guys know that? Yeah, so it's the big celebration of, and I say celebration in a lot of ways people don't feel they want to celebrate diabetes, but it's looking what we're doing to improve people's life with diabetes and what we're doing to move forward and find better ways to treat it and researching even for cure. So, but here today we're talking specifically about doing your best to lower your risk of diabetes. So what is diabetes mellitus? Are you guys aware there's actually a lot of disease states that use the word diabetes in it, not just diabetes mellitus? Have you ever heard of any other diseases with diabetes as the first name? There's one called diabetes insipidus. So there are a few disease states, and sometimes it gets confusing when we just say diabetes. So to divulge a little bit in diabetes mellitus, this is a metabolic disease in which the body has an inability to produce or does not produce enough insulin, and this causes elevation in your blood glucose levels. The Latin translation is a honey sweet siphon. So the word diabetes actually means siphon, and the word mellitus means honey sweet. So some of those other disease states with diabetes are referring to a siphon, but maybe it's something else like water. There are so many different forms of diabetes. It takes a specialist and a degree to kind of understand all the different types of diabetes that are out there. Hundreds, really, because some are genetic disorders or one gene, two genes. Some are latent disorders. Some are related to medicines or problems with the pancreas, but we think of it in mainly three different forms: type 2 diabetes, type 1 diabetes, and gestational diabetes. So that's what we're going to focus on today. So type 2 diabetes mellitus is the most common form. This is about 90% of people who have diabetes mellitus are affected with type 2 diabetes. This condition is characterized by insulin resistance. So most often in the stage or the life of people with type 2 diabetes, at one point they had very normal insulin glucose levels, but with certain risk factors the body starts to become more resistant to insulin, and then the pancreas tries to make more, but eventually it gets to the point where that balance is off and the insulin is not matching the insulin resistance, and then the blood sugar levels start to rise. There have been some other names for type 2 diabetes. We at one point called it adult onset diabetes. This is no longer correct because we actually see a very large increase in children who have type 2 diabetes and non-insulin dependent diabetes mellitus. Well, how many of you know somebody with type 2 diabetes who's on insulin? Yeah, there's a lot of people who with type 2 diabetes do need insulin. It's a little bit different than being dependent on it, but it's kind of confusing to call it non-insulin dependent diabetes when often people with type 2 diabetes do need insulin therapy. So type 1 diabetes, this is different because instead of being resistant to insulin, what happens here is it's an autoimmune disease in which the body attacks the insulin secreting cells or the beta cells of the pancreas and destroy the body's ability to make insulin. So people with type 1 diabetes always require insulin, and without insulin, they are in a life-threatening condition called diabetic ketoacidosis. This also, like type 2 diabetes, has been under different names. Juvenile onset diabetes. Again, this is kind of a misnomer because it doesn't just happen in juveniles. People with type 1 diabetes, although most commonly we see it in the younger ages, it can happen at any decade of life, 20s, 30s, 40s. I see people who get type 1 diabetes in their 70s or 80s. Insulin-dependent diabetes, well, it does kind of fit this name, right? Type 1 diabetes, you always require insulin, you are dependent on it. But again, it was confusing between the two types of diabetes, and looking at as a type 1 or an autoimmune disease seems to make more sense as terms of classifications. So we talked a little bit about what diabetes is. I like this cartoon because I think it helps explain it in a very easy way to understand a little bit of the difference to it. So we have our two things. We have our G, the glucose buddy, and our I, the insulin. When we eat, what we eat is turned into sugar that goes into our blood. Sugar is our source of energy, but we need insulin for the body to be able to use this for energy. Insulin is the doorman to the cells. Insulin is what opens up a gate to allow glucose to go in from the blood into the cells where it gets processed and used for energy. So if we look at the top cartoon, this one here, this is generally looking at somebody without diabetes or without insulin resistance. So you see it's pretty easy to get in, insulin opens the door, glucose just walks in, they're having a good time in the cell because now they're being used for energy, so it just walks in easily. Now if we look at type 2 diabetes, and again we're characterizing this as insulin resistance, what do you see with the door? The insulin can't open it, right? The door is jammed, it's stuck, it's pushing hard. Maybe a glucose molecule gets by, maybe a second one gets by, but they're just not moving freely into the cell. The body's not getting as much energy, and we have more buildup of the glucose in the blood. The other cartoon, or this cartoon down here, the type 1 diabetes, this is representing that lack of insulin, right? So if you don't have insulin, or the guy that can open the door, the glucose can't get in there. So glucose levels in the blood get high very quickly with type 1 diabetes. So I hope this kind of helps you understand a little bit of a difference in why we talk so much about insulin and insulin resistance between the two types of diabetes. So why you're here is to talk about what is all this commotion about diabetes. Well, we are finding that diabetes and prediabetes is increasing at an alarming rate. In 2012, 29.1 million Americans, or about 9.3% of the population, had diabetes. Looking at the component of what is that is type 1, it's just about under 5%, 1.25 million American and children have type 1 diabetes. And type 1 diabetes is something that can't be prevented, and we're focusing on type 2 as something that can hopefully be reduced and prevented. That's a lot of people, 9.3%. So, if you're playing the odds or looking around, that's almost 1 in 10 people that are even here today or when you're out and about. The other thing that's concerning is that, maybe if we counted around, we didn't find that it was about 1 in 10. We found that the number was a little bit higher, is because there are a lot of people who are going on undiagnosed. They're looking at 8.1 million people, and this gets higher as we have more birthdays. So if you're age 65 or older, the percentage that are undiagnosed is about 25.9%. I'm sorry, that's diagnosed and undiagnosed. The new cases is still very high, 1.7 million new diagnoses in a year. It may look smaller than 2010, but keep in mind we're still having an increase in the undiagnosed cases, which is surprising to me that we're finding it's still a very significant number, but it concerns me that there's still way too many people that we are missing and not getting diagnosed. Prediabetes, this is also increasing at an alarming rate. I think the last time I gave a presentation, I was going off the older statistics, which was 29 million Americans in 2010 had prediabetes, and now the number is up to 86 million. The thing about diabetes is that it is a very risky condition. It has a lot of risk of complications, especially when we think about the heart, the vessels, and it is among one of the 7th leading causes of death in the United States. So this is all the commotion. When we talk about diabetes, type 2 diabetes especially, it is important to consider obesity as one of the higher risks for it. This is a map that has been released by the CDC. Raise of hands, how many of you have seen this map before? So just a few. Is it hard to see? Can we dim the lights maybe? Yeah, I see a little glare up here too. Okay, they'll work on dimming the lights. I don't know if this helps at all. Oops. So really, I guess I'll describe it to you. Hopefully you guys know your geography, right? This is just really a map of looking at the United States. And it starts looking on the top of obesity, and we define this as somebody with a BMI over 30. So back in 1994, the percentage of states with more than 14 to 17% obesity rates were pretty low. Some in the South and even the great state of Indiana actually had a higher rate of obesity at that time. And then as the years have progressed, these colors have changed dramatically. So now we're seeing a lot of these states that had lower obesity risk are now showing rates over 26%, including the great state of Indiana. They have definitely increased their obesity rates as they've gone from 94, 2000, and 2009. So why do we care about this, or why do we talk about a BMI? This is something that gets routinely measured every time you see the doctor. Are you guys familiar with what your actual BMI is? I see a lot of hands, and yes, okay. So it is really just a measurement looking at your height and your weight to determine what is a healthy body weight. So it is your weight in kilograms over your height squared. This is a table. Now, I'm sorry you guys can't see it as well as I would like you to see, but this is a table looking at BMI and what do they mean. So it's on the left laying out your height, and then on the bottom looking at what we consider healthy weight, overweight, obese, and morbidly obese BMI. So since it's not that easy to see, don't worry, we're gonna have a little chart in which you can look at yours too in a little bit. But what we want to see is that everybody is in the green or in a healthy weight or healthy BMI, which is 18 to 25. When you're getting in the overweight, you have more risk of prediabetes and diabetes, and that risk increases as you get to the next category, obese, and the next category, morbidly obese. BMI is somewhat controversial. Why is that? Well, it is not looking at why the weight is there, it is just looking at how much weight. So I like this cartoon here. Hopefully, is it better? Can you guys see a little bit better now? Okay. You have two people on a scale. They both are 6 foot tall, they're pretty tall, and weigh 250 pounds. Who would you say has more risk of diabetes? The nice Speedo or the blue sweatsuit? Sweatsuit, yeah, because you can tell there's a big difference in muscle mass versus fat mass, and especially that abdominal obesity. But yet, if you look at the bottom, their BMI is exactly the same. It is 33.9. That is because when we are looking at a BMI, we are not looking at the cause of the weight or what the weight is, if it's muscle or fat, we are just purely looking at the weight. So somebody can have the same exact height and weight, but yet be at a very different risk for metabolic diseases like prediabetes and diabetes. 40 inches for men and greater than 35 inches for women. So you can see that the person in the blue sweatsuit is definitely going to have a higher abdominal circumference. I'm not sure if that's a male or female. I think it could go however you want to interpret it. And other things you could do is underwater weighing. That'd be pretty cool, but we don't have that capability. I don't know anybody who does that, but that kind of takes a hydrostatic picture at it. Skin folds, so obviously the more fat there, the more you're going to be able to pinch. And then there's a neat technique called dual energy x-ray. Has anybody ever had a bone density? Yeah, so this is, we call it DEXA. DEXA cannot just be used to look at the bones, but also your percentage of body fat. It's a pretty neat tool. I like this cartoon because, again, it's highlighting something with the BMI. This woman gets on the scale and she says, according to this, I'm under height, right? So one way to improve your BMI is to grow. Well, they don't have a medicine out there to do that yet. Otherwise, that could maybe solve a lot of problems. So back to this. Hopefully you can see it better now. So if we're looking at the obesity trends, we're seeing that we go from this cream and yellow to more oranges to a lot of orange and red. If you look down on the lower row, this is our diabetes. So as you can see, the diabetes trend is a little bit behind the obesity trend, but it is following that same pattern where we start off with a lot of the lighter yellows to more darker yellows, oranges, to seeing the dark orange and red. So as the obesity trends increase, so does the diabetes trends. We are now, as we talked earlier, we don't call it adult onset diabetes because we are seeing a lot of type 2 diabetes in youth. About 208,000 Americans under age 20 are estimated to have diagnosed diabetes, which is approximately 0.25% of that population. While looking at comparatively, we know that type 1 diabetes is a high risk in that age group, or a higher risk. That's only 18,000 of those particular individuals, so we're seeing a very high incidence of type 2 diabetes in the population under 20. So why is this? Why are we seeing such a change in our youth and change in obesity in general in the U.S.? Some of the thought to the children is that there's kind of a target or a youthful start on obesity. Kids are very vulnerable to ads, right? We learned a lot about this with smoking, and we see it a lot with our food advertisements, cereals, the yogurts, all these sugary things are very targeted at kids to look like it's something that they're going to enjoy or want. We're also seeing larger portions and larger serving. So I thought this was kind of a very interesting display of looking at fast food. I mean, we all do occasionally have fast food. Look at how much it's changed in 20 years. A burger 20 years ago was approximately 333 calories, and now 590. A serving of fries was 210, and now we're seeing servings of fries to be approximately 610 calories. So if someone is going to get a meal and they assume a meal is meant for them, they're consuming way more calories than what they should. Although I don't promote fast food, the 20 years ago meal is at least a much smaller calorie and could be within an 1,800 calorie diet. So we're pushing these larger portions and high fat, high salt, high carbohydrate foods. We're seeing less cooking at home. I mean, I know that's tough as a society because a lot of parents are both working and they're not having the meals at home. We talked about the calories that we're consuming when we're eating out, the internet and video games. That's a huge change in how kids are. We don't play as much. You sit and you work on your computer, you play video games. Ideally, kids should have less than 2 hours of screen time a day, and we're seeing that those times, there was a study that just came out that showed the average teenager spends 7 to 8 times hooked either to the internet or screen. So that's where when you're sitting and typing and playing, you tend to not go through your calories. 17% of our youth now are overweight or obese, and the risk, if they don't have diabetes in a young age, heavy adolescents generally tend to become heavy adults. So know your risk. Some risks for pre-diabetes, diabetes. One is a condition called polycystic ovarian syndrome. This is something in which you should look to have your glucose and insulin resistance screened regularly. History of vascular disease. If you've had problems with your heart, if you've had not just heart attacks, but even if you've had to have stents placed, this is a risk for diabetes. If you've had abnormal cholesterol, there's definitely a certain component of the cholesterol that is more of a metabolic. This is your triglycerides. If you have high triglycerides, that kind of coincides with having metabolic problems or high glucose. Low HDL. HDL is our good cholesterol. So if your good cholesterol is low, that carries a higher risk for diabetes. Certain races, so African American, Native American, Indian, Latino, Asian American, Pacific Islander, these all carry higher risk for diabetes and prediabetes. Family history of diabetes. Being overweight or obese, that's where we talked again, the BMI, generally this is over 27. Age over 45, and sedentary lifestyle. I think this is the last one. Oh no, high blood pressure. So looking at this risk, you guys may be looking and kind of calculating what you have. Some of it you can't change. I've not been able to figure out how to change your family. I don't know if anybody else has. That's what you get. Your age, those birthdays just keep coming, right? We can't change that. And you're not going to change your ethnicity. So looking at some of these other modifiable factors is a great way to reduce your diabetes risk. So breaking it down by race or ethnicity, The rates, the highest rate is in the American Indians and Alaskan Natives. That's 15.9%. The risk is 7.6%, non-Hispanic whites, 9%, Asian Americans, 12.8% in Hispanics, 13.2% in non-Hispanic blacks, and then we have some breakdown in the Asian American and breakdown among the Hispanic individual. So it is very important to kind of understand your heritage and know if you're more at risk and take consideration to do something at a younger age. So what is the number one symptom of prediabetes? Anybody have a thought or a guess? Thirst, that's a great thought, but it's really nothing. Most people don't have any symptom of prediabetes because it often takes those really high glucose numbers or numbers that are more consistent with diabetes to carry the thirst. And even diabetes often goes without symptoms. So don't think you're free if you don't have symptoms. You still could be at risk. So who should be screened? So we talked about a lot of these risk factors. If you are under 45, we're looking at if you're overweight, if you have risk factors like high blood pressure, low HDL, high triglycerides, family history of gestational diabetes, and age 45, generally we should look at having these yearly screenings to look at your glucose, especially if you're overweight. So what is prediabetes? I've mentioned this a couple times, and this is where your glucose levels exceed the normal range, but they're not high enough for diabetes to be diagnosed. So if we think back to that cartoon, remember how the insulin could open the door? So a lot of times early with prediabetes, either there's more insulin around to help, or the door isn't as adherent. So it can open it and enough glucose can get in, but there's still a little bit of glucose that's stuck in the blood. With this disease, it's not nothing. It's not borderline. It's not a touch of diabetes. There is still an increased risk for cardiovascular problems like heart attacks and strokes. And 10% of people with prediabetes will develop type 2 diabetes every year. And most all with prediabetes do convert within 10 years. We define prediabetes in a few ways. I know if you're a Reid employee, we all get our wellness screens in which we look at fasting blood sugar. So that tends to be one of the more common ways to screen for prediabetes. If your fasting blood sugar is between 100 and 126, that is consistent with prediabetes. If it is above 126, that is more consistent with diabetes. All these tests do need to be confirmed. So not just one occasion labels you with prediabetes, but it needs to be 2 consecutive tests. And there are some other tests like glucose tolerance tests and A1Cs that can also kind of help clarify your diabetes risk and prediabetes risk. So I put this slide on. This is very medical, so maybe for some of the medical staff in here, it'll make more sense. But why I put this in is because I want you guys to understand why it's important to care about prediabetes and why is it important to care about reducing your risk of diabetes. We start off with normal, healthy beta cell function. The beta cells are your insulin-making cells. As we see insulin resistance increase, the cells have to make more insulin. This effect only lasts for a little while, and you still have normal glucose tolerance, or NGT, during this increase in insulin resistance. So you can have a very nice-looking fasting glucose or glucose tolerance test or A1C because your beta cells are able to make more insulin. Well, as soon as that beta cell starts to fail and the insulin secretion starts to go down and the beta cell mass starts to go down, even though they're hitting more demands or more workload, that's when your glucose starts to change. And this is IGT, stands for impaired glucose tolerance. It's another fancy name for prediabetes. And then by the time that prediabetes advanced to diabetes, everything is still declining. So you went from having normal insulin to already a loss to about 60% of your beta cell mass and a loss of almost 40 to 60% of the beta cell function. So that means your cells are dying, which means eventually you're going to lose that insulin secretion. And that's why we see a lot of people with type 2 diabetes who need insulin, because over time those beta cells cannot do what they're demanded to do. So that's why getting on board when it's early, you can help regenerate and maintain healthy beta cells. So what's your risk? Hey, we get to do our first paper. So you probably all picked up this test here. It says the diabetes risk score. First, it's highlighting some of the risks that we've already talked about, but I think if you guys are good at mental math, we should look at taking this quiz together so you can see what is your risk right now. So the first says is that my weight is equal or above that listed in the chart below. So if you turn over, there's an at-risk weight chart. This is essentially your BMI. If your weight is so on the left-hand side is your height. Find your height in feet and inches without shoes. So it's 4'10", 4'11", 5'0". That's what those mean there. So find where your height is, and then look over at your weight. So if your weight is equal to that number or above, you're in the overweight or obese category. If your weight is under that, you are of a healthy body weight. Of course, we don't want it to be too low, and we didn't highlight underweight, but so for me, I'm 5'7", so my weight should be under 172 to be in a healthy body weight. So if you were below that, you have no points. If you are above that, give yourself 5 points. I am under age 65 and I get little or no exercise during a day. So if you're over 65, this is a free question, but if you're under 65, you either say yes or no and give yourself 5 or 0 points. I am between 45 and 64 years of age, so again, some free if you're above or below that, but if you're between 45 and 64, give yourself 5 points. I am 65 years or older. Sorry guys, you got some freebies, but now you have 9 points if you hit in that category. I am a woman who has had a baby weighing more than 9 pounds at birth. That was me, so I got a point there. I have a sister or brother with diabetes, and I have a parent with diabetes. So did you guys all get your score? Okay, so if you scored between 3 to 9 points, it says you are probably at a low risk for having diabetes now, but don't forget about it, especially if you're a Hispanic, Latino, African American, American Indian, Asian American, or Pacific Islander. You may be, if you had 10 or more points, you are at greater risk for having diabetes, and this is something that you should talk with your healthcare provider. So my score, not afraid to tell you, my score was 7. So my BMI, I'm working on it, but it's still above where it should be for my height. I've had a baby that's bigger than 9 pounds, and I have a parent with diabetes. So that puts me at 7 points, scoring me in the 3 to 9 points. So it means that I'm at low risk, but if anybody knows me or anybody has seen things, you know I have diabetes, right? Did anybody know that I had diabetes out there? A few hands, yeah. So I've lived with type 1 diabetes, so it's a little bit different, right? Because this is something that is not really determined by my weight or age. But what it says to me is looking at this is that I still have some risk for insulin resistance because of my family history with my dad and because of my BMI history. So it's something that I take very seriously, especially as I'm guiding other people to do their best and live healthy. So if you have risks, this is time to take action. Definitely talk to your physician about it, but one of the most important things is to look at what you can do to improve your lifestyle. So the thing that we hit on often with weight and diabetes risk is being active. And it doesn't take a marathon. It doesn't take running a 5K every day. It takes 150 minutes of physical activity a week. That's 30 minutes 5 days of the week. And I often encourage 10 minutes after you eat. So if you have a meal and you walk for 10 minutes, studies have shown that that greatly improves how your body handles glucose and insulin and will reduce your risk of hyperglycemia or diabetes. You can do this in any way, and we'll talk a little bit more about different ways to look at it. But combining that activity with a weight loss of 5 to 10%. So that's not a lot. So if I look at your weight loss goals, if you're somebody who weighs 200 pounds, 5 to 10% of your weight is 10 to 20 pounds. So often we set these goals to get from 200 to 140. That's a great long-term goal, but to make a huge metabolic impact, it doesn't always have to be these huge numbers. We're looking at 5 to 10%, and those two things together create a 58% reduction in the onset of type 2 diabetes. It's amazing. There's not a lot of medical therapies that can often work that good. Those two things together are very key in reducing your diabetes risk. So I put these keys in because myself, like many people out there, can find reasons to not be physically active. And that's why sometimes just breaking it to multiple little things during the day can help, or just make time. Find free time and keep track of your activities. You could pick a few 30-minute times in the week for family activities. How great is that? Because you're not getting yourself activated or motivated. It could be your spouse or your partner, your children, your parents, getting everybody active and doing something as a family. Add it to your daily routine. I love seeing people after lunch here go out and go for a 5-10-minute walk. That's a great way of doing it. Walking or biking to work, walk your dog, exercise while you watch TV. For those of you who still have to watch commercials, that's a great time to just get up and walk, or grab some weights and do some reps while the commercials are on. Park further away from your destination. That's a big one, right? And what we always say, take the stairs. We talked about doing something on your lunch hour, and then look at something that doesn't take a lot of time to do. It doesn't take time for you to go out and walk, jog if you like jogging, or even going up and down the stairs. Bring others into it. This is key for me. When I have others with me doing things, it makes you more, I think, responsible to do it, and encourages you more because you have a partner that's working on it together. So find families or friends to support you, or invite them to be active with you. You can make some sort of social event. Those Wii games or Xbox, those are always fun. Or develop new friendships at your gym, like the Y, or make a hiking club. There's walking clubs and running clubs and biking clubs here in the community, so there's a lot of things that you can join that aren't necessarily at a high cost. Energize yourself. One of the things that we forget is we always say we feel so tired, we can't exercise. The act of exercise actually helps increase your energy level. So it may not be that you're going out and doing the 30 minutes right away, but if you get a little bit, you will feel more energized. And the next time you may be doing 15 and then 20 and then 30, and you feel better, you'll sleep better. Stay motivated, plan ahead. I know for myself, I plan on certain days of the week that I can't have excuses to do it. So I just have to do it. And then the other days I consider bonus days. That was helping me somewhat, but then I also decided to join a dance class because it was multiple things. It was making me responsible to somebody else. It's fun, and there are other people there that are looking for me to be there. So if they're not there, they'll say, hey, Erica, where were you at dance class? We really needed you for this routine. So I find those kind of things to be very, very fun, and it also helps build new skills. You know, maybe next time you see me dancing, you'll see like, oh, I definitely noticed she's been doing something different. So, and encourage your children to do something with you. You know, you could do certain classes together, take them hiking, dancing is listed here, tennis, that's a great thing to do and to teach your children. Use resources. You don't have to go out and take these fancy things. You could, walk in your home. You could push up. You can do sit-ups. I find these things online all the time where you can do little challenges to help build your core. We did this at work where we did a plank challenge to help everybody get stronger abdominal muscles. And that's cheap, it's free, and everybody likes it, it's fun. And then there's a lot of things in the community that you can do or join that are free or of no cost. And make the most of all conditions. I don't know how many times we talk about the sad winter weather of the Midwest and Indiana. Right? That doesn't mean you can't. Gosh, I'm going to tell you, this hospital is a great place to come and walk, right? If you're in the community and you come to Reid, walk in this hospital, you're going to get miles really quickly. It's a very nice, beautiful, there's lots of artwork that's always changing. It's a great place to come and walk. The mall, but it depends on how much you trust your pocketbooks. That's another good place to go. At least there's not as many stores, so you may have less risk of losing money in there. But these are places to consider going, or just find something inside that you like. I talk about people getting a little kickstand for their bike, so they don't have to buy a stationary. They can use their bike in the summer and then kick it up and use it in the winter. So that's kind of our component on exercise. Again, it's not about going out and doing everything right away, but just adding and doing little bits at a time to get you to that 150 minutes of a weekly goal. So let's talk about eating. The American Diabetes Association is always talking about eating well and eating balance. And it's not saying that there are things you can never have, it's just thinking about taking everything in the appropriate balance. This comes as a part of managing your weight. So keeping this weight control in perspective, everybody's different. I don't know how many times you're with your spouse or a friend at work and you're doing the same thing, but everybody changes weight in a different rate. That's because we're all different. We have different ethnicities, different family histories, different metabolisms. So don't compare yourself to anyone else. Do what's best for you. Some things like depression and stress and foods are really going to affect the way you lose weight. Set realistic goals. Very important. Don't feel like you have to shoot for the moon right away. Set a goal. Set that 5%. And when you get to that goal, that feels amazing. It feels wonderful. I know that's what I do. And then when you get to that goal, you can decide, am I where I want to be, or do I want to look for another 5%? What do I want to do to change my goals? And find something that's maintainable that you can continue to do and build on. I think this is one of what I discuss as a simple approach to nutrition is looking at your plate. Your plate, if you divide it up, you can make it to have a very nice balance of fruits, vegetables, grains, protein, and dairy. We still really want 5 servings of fruit and non-starchy vegetables a day. So if we're looking at fruits, it's better to eat them. Don't drink them. Don't drink them. Eat them. And you can eat a variety of fruit. It can be fresh, it can be frozen, it can be canned, or it can be dried. The canned, watch, of course, the syrups. Vegetables, vary your veggies. The darker they are, the dark green veggies, the better they are for you. Orange veggies, and even consider, I don't really consider peas, I know this is on here, but beans too is another good way of getting carbohydrate and protein in with there too. Oils, know that there are some really good fats out there. If you're looking at your fats from fish, nuts, those are a good source of fat, and decreasing the amount like butter, margarine, shortening, or lard. Dairy is very helpful, very beneficial. You can consider going low fat or fat free. If you can't have milk, a lot of people don't like milk, the soy or lactose free products are great. Grains is that quarter of your plate. I can't tell you enough how important it is to consider whole grain things. So carbohydrates are so different when we talk about grains. When you're eating anything that's white, these are high glycemic foods that put you at risk for high insulin levels because they put a lot of demand on your pancreas. So it's best to try to consume whole grains and avoid all the white pastas, rices, breads. And look, when you read the ingredients, just because it says wheat doesn't mean that it's whole. Make sure it says whole wheat when you're reading the ingredients. And meats and beans, we talk about going lean with protein, choosing low-fat or lean meats and poultry. Try to bake, broil, or grill, and then vary your choices so you don't get bored with, all I eat is chicken. I hear that all the time, all I have is chicken, all I eat is chicken. Well, yeah, that can get boring, so try some fish, try some turkey. It's okay to have pork or red meat too. You just want to have it in variance and balancing out with the low-fat meats. So understanding calories. Calories is a measure of energy obtained from food. 1 pound of fat is about 3,500 calories. When you look at how you lose that, you have to consider what is your basal metabolic rate, what is your resting metabolic rate, and what is your exercising metabolic rate. So the number of calories you burn depends on those, the amount of muscle mass you're moving. So back to that cartoon, the Speedo gentleman, he's going to burn a lot more calories when he works out because of his muscle mass, the amount of weight moved, and the amount of time the activity takes. So I'm a big component of trying to create value to things and motivation. So I don't know how many of you have smartphones out there, but there are a lot of very nice applications to your smartphones, or apps, as the cool kids call them, applications. As I'm saying here. MyFitnessPal is one of my favorites. Why? Because it really allows you to understand what you're eating, and it will give you, hey Erica, man, this food is high in salt. Maybe you shouldn't have as much next time, or gosh, Erica, you've gone over your carbohydrate content for the day. So it really helps you kind of understand what you're doing or putting some value into what you're eating, so the next day you may choose different foods or snacks. 7-minute workout, this is a really neat app. If you have just 7 minutes, it gives you through a little exercise course. that you can kind of pick up and do at any time, and it encourages you. So if you notice it hasn't used it, it sends you that little message, just like someone sent you a text message. Hey, Erica, it's time to work out. So you take that 7 minutes if it's your break, and you've got a really good exercise that's going to help build your muscle mass and help you feel better. Endomondo, this is something that allows some influence from experts and nutritionists. Fitbit, Garmin, and Jawbone. If you don't know what these are fitness tracking devices. So I know Reid offers discounts to Fitbit, which is a really nice app too. Garmin is another product, Jawbone is another product. What I find is very helpful about these is it's just another motivation tool. We talk about having friends to make you exercise. Well, these things, I wear one, and it beeps at me if I'm not being active enough, and it sets goals for me for the day. And I find it very encouraging to look and say, oh, gosh, I'm just 1,000 steps from my goal. I'm going to walk up and down my house or chase my kids around or do something to get me to the goal. And these apps, you can often challenge people. So you can see, my mom wears one, so I can see she likes to harass me if she has more steps than I do. So it's just another way, even if you live distance apart, because she's 5 hours from me, that you can still kind of have fun and motivate each other. Weight Watchers actually, it tends to stand the test of time as far as helpful programs for weight management, and they have a really nice nutritional application. The page that I looked at said it was free, so those of you who have been in Weight Watchers and kind of understand it, it may be a good application or app to put on your phone. So improve your eating habits. Evaluate what triggers your eating, set goals, keep daily log, and this is where those phone apps help because they help you keep that daily log. Reward yourself, and don't feel like this is ever going to happen quickly. Don't buy into anything where someone says, oh, I just took this HCG and I lost 10 pounds right away, because these aren't realistic things. These are things that may happen, but most often we're at risk of rebound weight gain. So trigger eating. A lot of people will tell me, and myself, when I'm stressed, I trigger eat. So if you know that this is a problem for you, try to find another strategy to avoid it. So if you eat when you're stressed, kind of acknowledge that you're stressed and maybe look at something like meditation, or look at yoga, or look at breathing, or exercise, or talking to someone to help deal with the stress. The same thing with feeling angry or upset. Find a way to deal with it. Exercise is a great way. A quick walk or even meditation is a great way to deal with it. If it's a certain time of day, you may be someone who always skips breakfast, which I just hit my head, please eat breakfast. But if you avoid eating, sometimes you often tend to consume more calories at other components of the day or snacks. So it is important to try to keep that balance or that plate to avoid you to feel like you need to eat because you haven't had a chance to eat yet. Pressure from friends and family. I guess this is key with the holidays, right? There's going to be a lot of food out, a lot of food that's good, and maybe grandma's going to tell you need to have her stuffing. Or I know my Aunt Sharon makes like 9 pies at Thanksgiving and wants you to eat every slice of it. You don't have to. You can say, this is my favorite. I'm going to choose this. I'm not. I'm really working on improving my health. You don't need to eat it just because they're telling you have to eat it. Being in an environment where food is available at meetings, right, or gatherings, don't sit by the food. I said if those donuts are in front of you, they're going to sit there and you're going to stare at them and want to eat them. Sit away from them where you can't reach it, and then you won't ask people to pass them down to you. If you're bored or tired, find a hobby. Exercise. The sight or smell of food. Watch. This is a big thing for me. If it's not there, you won't eat it, right? So if you know you love it and you buy it, you're going to eat it. So keep that out and only buy it when it's time to reward yourself, or keep it in a very inconvenient place. I get food hidden on me, which helps. I appreciate it. So then I'm not going to look or eat it just because it's there. And that goes with eating mindlessly, feeling deprived. It's okay. Have those foods when it's time to have those food. Just don't make it a daily focus. Eating out, if you eat out consistently, you tend, just like that picture I showed earlier, it tends to have so many more calories than what you need. Find an alternative. Bring something with you, or find something at that restaurant, or eat half of it and get rid of the other half. And then watching TV, we already talked about exercise, don't eat. Sensible snacking, I'm not going to go through all of this because we're getting close to the end, but some things that I think are helpful is keeping good, healthy snacks with you. And sometimes, like, you may want that crunch. Well, some nice fruits or carrots, celery, these are very helpful and satisfying snacks. Choosing good beverages. I really stress to not consume calories through your beverages unless it is dairy. Okay, you don't want to have pops, and even diet pops tend to stimulate your hunger. Juices, I eat the fruit, don't drink it. If I worked to get my coffee down to milk, so my Starbucks latte I try to have with just skim milk, so I'm getting at least the protein and nutrients from the dairy component of it. And then if you occasionally need to have a glass of wine or beer, it's not such a bad deal, but daily, keep the calories out of your beverages. Nuts are a great snack. Why? Because they keep you full. There's protein and fiber in them, and they keep you full. So a little handful of nuts, although they may have a lot of calories, tend to help you feel fuller longer. And you can have chocolate, just keep it small and look at dark chocolate. If it's something that you don't like, you get used to it. The more you kind of transition yourself and taste it, you begin to appreciate the finer tastes. So considering drastic weight loss measures, I'm more of a fan of doing something that it will work and is maintainable. So doing something that's a drastic low-calorie diet, I don't routinely prescribe to this. If you are doing it, it definitely needs to be medically supervised because there are a lot of health risks. And what I find is that you hit a point where you stop losing weight, right? And then you're looking for more. What can I do more? It's better to maintain a healthy lifestyle and a maintainable lifestyle and slowly lose the weight than do something that you'll drop the weight quickly. Drug treatment. Remember, FDA approval is not required for over-the-counter diet aids and supplements. So you got to think very thoroughly when you're looking at these, and I don't recommend them because of the risk of not having it regulated by the FDA, and then often what I think is more of a risk is side effects, abuse, and rebound weight gain. Next and last is obesity surgery. This is a helpful tool. This is very helpful when maybe you're severely overweight or obese and have weight-related diseases, but you gotta really work hard on the others. It's only if you're not achieving goals with a non-surgical approach. So the other thing is just being kind of an advocate and helping and supporting people. There are a lot of events, because diabetes is so widespread, that it's important to kind of be advocates for those that are. There are many different awareness. We actually had a step out walk last year. I looked to see if I could find the date for this year, but I don't see it listed yet. There's a Tour de Cure, which is a bike race for diabetes, Fit for Good. So who has a Fitbit out there? Yay. So right now, you'll often find that Fitbit will kind of get into a charity. So for the month of November, they've pitted American Cancer Society, Heart Association, and American Diabetes Association against each other. So if you register your Fitbit and your steps, whoever gets the most steps will earn $500,000. So because you're here, this would be a great place to put your steps towards. And that changes. So I know a lot of people in my staff will change different charities to donate their steps to, and it's just a way to encourage you. Doesn't it feel good if I walk 10,000 steps, I could get the American Diabetes Association $500,000. Every little bit counts. And then the JDRF, which is a Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, they also have a walk. So these are just diabetes-focused things. Think about all the stuff Wayne County offers with their walks and the races, the Reid rides, the Wayne County challenges. These are all ways to just help raise your own awareness and get healthier. Here's some specific wonderful programs that we have here at Reid. The Nourish You program, which is an adult weight management program. They do a cooking class, which they tape and put over your local channels. And then they have free cooking classes. So I put the November one on here. I thought it was a good one. Hopefully you guys got wind of the free cooking class with good freezer meals. But your other handout that you have here today is showing the 2016 schedule. So I encourage you to go to these things because they're very great things to use to help you on your own journey. Speaking of, since it is American Diabetes Month, they do have a support group for people with diabetes that meets typically the third Wednesday of the month. And this month being American Diabetes Month, we are having a special Southern celebrity chef guest. So she's going to come and there'll be some appetizers for you, and she's going to talk about staying healthy and Diabetes 101, and she's also going to have some sampling of her cooking for you guys to try. So it is worth coming to. I think the more you hear, the more awareness you have, and the more you have fun, the more you will stay successful. So to lower your risk, we've highlighted a lot of different things: eating healthy, weight control. I didn't mention smoking cessation, but that is definitely something that puts you at risk for complications, whether you're in the overweight, obesity, prediabetes, or diabetes, controlling your blood pressure and being physically active. I stress often to know your numbers. So even you may have a different opinion of your numbers than anybody else will. So I think it's important for you to understand your numbers and your goals. So a blood pressure goal is under 140/80. Lipid goals, we have, I think that the most important lipid goals for metabolic disease or prediabetes, diabetes, is that LDL to be below 100, and in some cases below 70, and your HDL, which is your good cholesterol, to be above 40 in men and above 50 in women. Fasting blood sugar below 100, because remember 100 to 126 is prediabetes and above 126 is diabetes, and the A1C to be between 4 and 5.7. And if you have diabetes, mainly I'm going to shoot for a goal of less than 6.5%, but it may vary depending on multiple different things. So here is another thing: know your risk and know your numbers. So for everyone here today, if you haven't had it, we are inviting you to come to our free glucose screening. This is going to be like a drive-through experience, or even walk up. It is this Wednesday, November 18th from 7 to 10 a.m. It is in the parking lot behind the Reid Health Patient Financial Services and Reid Health Information Management, which is across from the Morrison Reeves Library. So if you come in, we do ask that you fast, so nothing to eat for 12 hours before you come. Take your medications as you would. We'll have people coming to, once you sign your form, coming to you and checking a finger stick blood sugar to see what your fasting sugar is like. And if it is in that abnormal range, we have some additional things to offer, like considering getting that test called an A1C, which is a way to assess your glucose average. And then you get breakfast. So we know that you fasted for 12 hours and you're hungry, but you did it because you want to know your numbers, you want to know your risk. So we encourage you to come and be aware of what that fasting blood sugar number is. So I'm going to leave on this motivational statement: do something today that your future self will thank you for. I think we always look at things to slowly make us feel better, and I'm always doing that for myself. I'm always looking at something to try to be better, whether it's reading something to help gain knowledge or being out and exercising. I want to do something so I continue to have the same health or better my health for the future. So that is my last slide. And you guys have been pretty amazing and very attentive. This may be one of the first times nobody's sleeping. So if you are sleeping, you got away with it. I didn't see you. Does anybody here have any questions for me? I'll put this back up. Any questions? Yeah. So I heard part of it when we were talking about vegetables. Do I make like vegetable smoothies? Yeah, right, yeah. I mean, I think any way that you're getting the food in a whole form. So if you tend to blend the vegetables, I guess in a sense you are getting some calories from a drink, but I almost consider that like you're consuming the vegetable because you're drinking it all together. I just would be careful sometimes about the fruits, the amount of like some of the higher glycemic fruits that you can add to that, everything in moderation. But generally, if you're looking at those homemade vegetable juices or fruit juices, that is a way to go. So that even on the nutritional thing, they'll say if you have 100%, meaning you make it yourself, that is much better than consuming something that is processed. That's a great question. Well, thank you guys then for being such an attentive audience, and I hope you go out and take the stairs on your way up from the hall.